Everyone. My name is Sydney Winston. I am an atheist activist out of Vancouver, Canada. Today, what we're going to do is review an old Hangout, a Google Hangout, a retro. It'll be a retro Google Hangout from years ago with Mr. Batman. So you can gauge for yourself whether Mr. Batman has improved or deteriorated over the years as a public liar, a Christian preacher. But first, I want to address Jill. Jill is known as Jesus is Lord, and he's also known as Rebuke and Reprove. Okay, so yesterday, Jill came into the room, and we were talking about God is imaginary, and we got into the discussion about the historicity of Jesus. We were talking about the actual period of time when Jesus lived, which is sort of I determined it to be the year 4 until the year 33. Okay, so that's that time frame. And me and Jill asked me a question at some point, and I didn't know the answer, which I should have said I didn't know the answer. But anyway, I gave a bullshit answer, and he said basically, when did Paul live? And I said after Jesus or something like that. I just threw it off the top of my head as if it was a fact that I knew something when I didn't. However, Jill, I've done some research in the meantime to atone for my mistake of pretending to know something that I don't know. So I apologize for that. Whereas the mythological Jesus was supposedly, allegedly born around about the year 4, died around the year 33. The supposed, or the person in the guise of Paul, he was born in the year 5. Jesus was born in the year 4. Saul was born in the year 5. He lived till approximately the year 67. So we got Jesus living from 4 to 33, and then we've got Saul living from 5 to 67. So Jill got into me saying, "There's your your contemporary evidence for Jesus." Now, we both agreed, Jill and we both agreed that Jesus and Paul never met. And the only time Paul saw Jesus was in a vision of some sort. I don't know when exactly, but years after the alleged crucifixion of the alleged Messiah. So I got questions for you now, Jill, because I've been thinking here. You've got this guy Saul. Okay, he's a Jewish zealot, Pharisee, and his job is to go out and arrest, harass, whatever, these Jewish, I don't know what they even called. They weren't Christian, Jewish Nazarenes. Yes, that was it, Nazarenes. Okay, so the Nazarenes were some kind of a threat to the Jewish organizations, and Saul was employed as like a police chief or something in order to grab and fetch and punish these Jewish Nazarenes. Now, Paul is pretty much the same age as Jesus, but he never met Jesus. But he met the son. I mean, he claims to have met the brother of Jesus. How does somebody who's contemporary with somebody else running in the same circles, how do they never meet? How does the preacher Jesus not meet the policeman Saul in around the same period when they were both alive at the same period? How is it that Saul is chasing after Jewish Nazarenes but not Jesus? He's never met Jesus. He's still chasing after Jewish Nazarenes because, you know, it's his job, I guess. it's what these heretics are up to. These Jewish Nazarenes. We don't like it. We're Jews. We're very Orthodox Jews, and we don't like these Jewish Nazarenes. So we're going to go chase after them and make their lives miserable. And that's what Saul was doing on the way to Damascus. He's on his way to Damascus to catch some Jewish Nazarenes and arrest them. He just wanted to arrest them, which is fine, I suppose, because that's his job. However, on the way, he had some kind of a medical emergency, had a vision of Jesus, even though he'd never met Jesus, he didn't know what he looked like, which is strange because he's contemporary, apparently, to Jesus, right, Jill? So you've got Paul, and so you got Paul and Jesus, or actually you've got Saul and Jesus, because Saul didn't become Paul until he saw that vision, okay, in his mind. He had a vision. So that's when he became Paul. So we're talking about Saul and Jesus. Saul and Jesus lived roughly about the same time. We agree, both of us, that Saul did not meet Jesus. Why is that, Jill? How is that possible? If you're claiming that Jill, if you're claiming that Jesus and Saul are contemporaries, and they were, if Jesus actually existed, then why did not Saul actually go after the big boys? Go after the guys who were the head honcho? Why wasn't Saul going after Jesus? Why wasn't Saul listening to Jesus? Why wasn't Saul attending the sermons of Jesus? Why did Saul not come into contact with Jesus? I think that there, Jill, seriously, I'm telling you now, the fact that Saul never met Jesus proves that Jesus never existed. Okay? It's concrete, contemporary evidence that Jesus never existed. Because Saul, who is the same age as Jesus, who was working in the same area, who obviously knew about these Nazarenes, why didn't he go and listen to a sermon, or maybe send one of his deputies to go and listen to a sermon? I mean, this went on for 3 years. Let's say Jesus' ministry was a 3-year-long ministry, as far as I'm aware. Okay, so let's just say, for example, from the year 30 to the year 33, Jesus is going around, corner to corner, park to park, whatever, and preaching and what. I wasn't there, so I don't know exactly what he was doing, but he was in the area. Saul as well was in the area. Now, in the year 30, Saul would have been 25. So when you're a young man of 25 to 28, okay, the 3-year ministry of Jesus. So 25 to 28, you're young, you're out there. You don't not come across or hear about, the good news and all this kind of stuff that the alleged Jesus was trying to sell. Okay, so the fact that in contemporary times, when we know that two people claim to have been, when we claim that two people existed at the same time, of the same age, in the same area, in the same business, where in that time, at that time nobody stayed home, everybody was out and about, listening. I mean, that's how people that's how preachers get their crowds in those days. They spoke and people gathered around to listen, I guess, and there were fights maybe. But the fact is that Saul is never recorded as doing any of these things. First time we hear of him is he's a policeman. He's like the head policeman heading out to Damascus to arrest Jewish Nazarenes. So, Jill, you can laugh all you want. You can make as many claims on your channel that you debunked or defeated Sidney Winston. But that's all hot air. It's all nonsense, because you got to explain to me why Saul never met Jesus if they were contemporaries. So I'll be waiting for your answer, Jill. It's my next question for you. God is imaginary. That's already in the books. We don't have to worry about that. You tell me why Saul and Jesus never met. Even if they never met face to face, you tell me why Saul never heard of Jesus, never tried to arrest Jesus. Nothing. There's nothing. Fact is that, and it makes sense, if God is imaginary, Jesus is imaginary. And that kind of brings all the proof we need on that subject. So now, can we please proceed to the business of the day, which is Mr. Batman. We all love Mr. Batman, don't we? Here he is. He's hiding behind some text, but man, look at him. Look how he looks. He looks pretty damn confident about something. So, Mr. Batman, if you want to, before we get started, if you do want to contact him and ask him any questions, Mr. Batman can be contacted as Jim Barbar. He's at 502-354-8699. 502-354-8699. I urge every single one of you to call and ask questions and try and create an atheist out of Mr. Batman. I'd love to do that. So let's get on with it.
Objective, rather, about reality?
No, reality is objective, but truth is an abstraction. When you say truth, you're talking about an abstraction. There are things that are true, but there's not something that equals truth.
So is that a truth statement?
Yeah, it's a true statement.
So wouldn't that equal truth?
Yep.
So you just negated your own position. Thank you.
Not at all.
So what is your definition of truth then, sir, since you just negated your own position?
Well, I think empiricism is how you come to the truth.
Empiricism.
Oh, good stuff. Empiricism is how you come to the truth. Did you hear that? That is brilliant. Brilliant. I should. Okay, make a note of that. Okay, somebody, make a meme or something. Empiricism is the way to come to the truth. Is that what he said exactly? That was excellent. What's it?
Well, I think empiricism is how you come to the truth.
Empiricism is how you come to the truth. Write that down. That's an axiom. I'm gonna add that axiom. No, well, the truth to me kind of doesn't mean anything. The truth. Truth about what? This whole notion of the word truth being something meaningful without any backup or without any facts behind it just doesn't make sense to me. But what this guy says, Vanilla, which is on the, I don't know what his real name is, but it's just Vanilla on the screen. Empiricism is everything. Everything.
Empiricism. And how do we do empiricism, sir?
Okay. Oh, Mr. Batman's about to be introduced. How we do empiricism? How do we do empiricism? How do you do empiricism? Let's find out.
Well, using senses and the scientific method.
Oh, brilliant! How do you do empiricism? Using your senses and the scientific method. It's a good start, huh? Now let's see if there's a problem with that.
Senses and science. I love science.
There he goes. I love science.
Now, again, we're talking about truth and we're talking about empiricism. We're talking about our senses. How do you know your senses are
working? There he goes. How do you know? Well, okay. Before you get into Mr. Batman, you're going to say, how do you know your senses are reliable and whatnot? The question is, if you can ask anybody else that same question, how do you know your senses are reliable, then why can't I ask you, Mr. Batman, how do you know your senses are reliable? How do you know that this God that you say you believe in, how do you know this is a reliable thing that you feel about this God? You don't. You know that it's reliable to you, apparently, somehow, but it's not reliable as a universal.
Working correctly, sir.
Well, it depends on which sense you're talking about. Which sense are you talking about?
You said your senses to relate to reality. So what senses would you be talking about, sir?
Well, I'm talking about all of the general senses of perception.
That's what I'm talking about. So how do you know your senses are working correctly then?
Well, if you have eye problems, where do you
Mr. Batman? Yeah, about
I'm
your
sorry,
senses.
I didn't hear you.
I said if you have vision problems, where do you go?
Well, how do you know that they're working correctly? How would you know that you're having vision problems?
I'm asking a question.
I'm
asking you a question.
How would you know that you're having vision problems? Okay, I'm asking anybody out there, not just Mr. Batman, but you, who's watching. There's 3 people watching now. There's 8 people watching right now. And let me ask you this. How would you know if you had vision problems? Because Mr. Batman is about to tell you.
Question, sir. How would you know if you're having vision problems? If you're depending on your senses. Aren't you depending on your senses to validate your senses?
You see what I'm talking about? This man, he's a clown. He's like the most brilliant clown I've ever met in my life. I got to put something up here. Really, I got to put that there. Sorry. Bang.
Is that a genuine question, Hillbilly?
Absolutely. Are you depending on your senses to validate your senses?
Well, yeah, of course. You assume that your senses work properly, and you basically can tell when things aren't working properly, and then you go to the doctor if they aren't, like the eye doctor.
Guy sounds like Tom Rabbit, don't you think?
I agree wholeheartedly. That fits my position and my worldview completely. My question is, how do you equate to that, sir? Because do you believe that you're nothing but evolutionary goo to you?
Oh, God, I hate it when he does that. It's so stupid. It's so juvenile. Goo to you, to glue, to all this. He's got this. He used to have this He's probably going to mention it 3 or 4 times during this session.
The way of the zoo in a few billion years.
Glue to you by the way of the zoo in a few billion years. It's stupid.
Fish to philosopher kind of thing.
Fish to philosopher. What does that even mean? It's dumb. It's Christian dumb.
Evolutionary goo? I'm not really following you.
Evolutionary.
Do you believe evolution is how we got here as our origin story? Or do you believe we got here through special creation by a God that designed us and created us?
Well, yeah, I think evolution is much more likely.
It's the only solution.
Okay.
It's the only answer.
So, again, my question still stands. On what basis do you have anything that you know to be true? Because if all we are bags of chemicals walking around bumping into one another, can inanimate objects know truth?
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? I'm going to repeat that for you because this guy is so dumb. He's so dumb. He makes the stupidest statements. I'm gonna see if I can repeat it for you.
Is much more likely.
Okay. So, again, my question still stands. On what basis do you have anything that you know to be true?
On what basis do you have anything to know that anything is true? So, on what basis do you have to know that you have vision problems? You can't trust your senses. How can you know you have vision problems? Just because you can't see, just because everything's blurry, that might mean your senses are lying to you. This is how he thinks.
Because if all we are bags of chemicals.
If all we are bags of chemicals
walking around bumping into.
If all we are bags of chemicals walking around bumping into each other.
One another, can inanimate objects.
If all we are bags of chemicals bumping into one another, can
know truth?
Can inanimate objects know truth? If all we are bags of chemicals bumping into each other, I'm sorry, I can't get through the sentence without having a grammatical, a cerebral grammatical attack, because nothing's making sense.
How would they know truth if inanimate objects aren't conscious? That doesn't make sense.
Exactly, sir. So how do you explain consciousness?
Well, consciousness is, I think that's an open question in science. I don't think there's a definitive answer, but I think my closest guess at explaining it would be that it has to do with you can't have consciousness without being alive, first of all, and you have to have. It also depends on, I would say, the level of intelligence of the organism you're talking about.
Well, before we go that far, you said you can't have consciousness until we're alive. Okay, well, let's put consciousness on the back burner for a second. How do you get from inanimate object to living inanimate object?
Well, right. I think that that it's a spontaneous process.
Oh, I'm just waiting for your answer, sir.
Yeah, I think it's a spontaneous process.
Oh, so you don't believe in science?
No, that's consistent with scientific evidence.
Can you show me any scientific evidence that shows spontaneous generation? Because we disproved that the particular scientific theory. Excuse me, sir. I waited for you because we refuted and destroyed that particular scientific theory over 100 years ago. So do you have any science at all that backs up your particular belief system, which that's exactly what it is, of spontaneous generation?
Well, they can do it in a lab.
Oh, really? Could you show me any science of that, sir?
Look up Craig Venter. He created a new form of life.
No, sir, he didn't create anything.
Yes, he did.
No, actually, he didn't. I'm very familiar with that one as well.
I'll give you another example
So you'll
since you don't
find
like
that
that
there's
one.
many, many different scientists
Here,
that have
I'll give you another
adapted.
example. Hold on.
Oh, I'm
hold
sorry.
on.
I thought you were done.
Hold on. The bottom of the seafloor, you know those hydrothermal vents? You know what I'm talking about? Those seafloor vents?
Yes, sir. Are you going to show me science, or are we going to talk about geology? Because we can change the subject if you like.
If you wait, I was going to tell you that the geothermal vents, there's been discoveries of new organisms, new species of organisms at the bottom of the ocean that
Right.
are
Species that are
previously
adapted to be in the places that they're supposed to be. That's not evolution, sir.
No,
You
not
said
exactly.
you had evidence of spontaneous generation. I would love to see it. Scientific evidence, not your basis just in whole cloth. Come on now, give me some science.
I am. Type in.
I don't need to type
geothermal
in, sir, because there's no such thing as
I just told
spontaneous
you.
generation.
No, there is.
Are you familiar with the scientific law of biogenesis?
Scientific law of biogenesis? That doesn't even sound like a scientific law.
Yes. Are you familiar with the scientific law of biogenesis? And before I get to with the question we need to ask before that is, are you familiar with what a scientific law is?
Okay. First of all, that doesn't sound like a scientific law to me. And if it is, then I would like for you to.
That's not the question. Are you familiar with what a scientific law is?
Yes.
Great. Now we can move on to the law of biogenesis. This is a scientifically proven law of science. That's what the law of science means. So why don't you Google the scientific law of biogenesis?
I'm not going to Google it. Just explain to me. I'm on my tablet, so.
That's great. Well, it's really easy. Life only comes from life.
Well, that doesn't disprove the example I just told you.
Why should he Google the scientific law of biogenesis, Jim? I mean, Mr. Batman, Christian Hillbilly, whatever the hell you're going by there. Why don't you just tell him? You're a science teacher, huh? You know the shit, right? You just said you're a science teacher. You teach science and apologetics to all ages. So why did you run away from the question? Why did you run away from the subject? Why did you try and say, hey, go Google it, rather? Instead of me explaining, I asked you the questions, do you know something? You said no, and your answer is to go Google it. Why don't you just explain it? You know, you're a teacher, you should be able to explain something pretty, concisely, few words. Can you not, Jim? Or are you not a teacher?
Actually, it does, sir. It does. Because what you're trying to prove is that life came from nothing. Is that correct? Spontaneous generation would be from going from no thing to something that happened to be alive. Wouldn't you agree?
You can't have no thing. That doesn't make any sense.
So
Exactly.
It came from something.
There's no such thing as a perfect vacuum. So the idea that there's
okay, sir. Are you going to clarify your statement then? So we have the life as you know it.
Here, let me clarify it for you.
It came from like a rock to a living organism, right?
On Earth, is it possible
something that was dead? I'll go ahead and give you the matter. Something that was dead and now it's alive, right?
On Earth, yes. The conditions
So I would love to see the science behind that.
Well,
because again, there's none. How do you go from
I don't know if that's
dead
true,
matter to living matter? You don't.
Here is a major flaw with Mr. Batman's argument. He says, how do you go from dead matter to living matter? Well, you've got to first figure out how this dead matter became dead matter, because when you say dead matter, you are implying that it's dead matter, which the reason it's described as dead matter is because it's not alive anymore. It's now dead. So when you ask, how do you go from dead matter to live matter? By assuming that the dead matter has never been alive before, you're making a huge logical mistake, Jim. So you shouldn't be asking, how do you go from dead matter to live matter? Because there's no such thing as dead matter before there was live matter. It wasn't dead. It hadn't been alive. If it hadn't been alive, it's not dead. It's innate. It's not dead. And innate does not imply that there's that it's decomposing. You know, dead implies that it's decomposing, right? Innate means it's still intact, right? Nothing's changing. It's not decomposing. It's not dead. Okay. Now, Jim, you're not a science teacher. You're a fraud. You're lying about being a science teacher. I have just explained to you something which is absolutely 100% logically valid. That you can't go from dead to live without first being live to become dead. You don't understand this concept. You are not a science teacher. You're a fraud, you're a fake, you're a snake oil salesman, you're a grifter.
Why wouldn't you?
Well, sir, let me ask you a question. What is truth?
You see, he did it again. The guy said, look at this. The guy, whoever he's talking to, vanilla, actually asked him a question. I'm going to
like a rock
point this
to a living organism, right?
On Earth, is it possible
Something that was dead. I'll go ahead and give you the matter. Something that was dead and now it's alive, right?
No, wrong.
On Earth, yes.
On Earth, yes. I don't quite understand what that means either.
The conditions
So
are,
I would love to see the science behind that.
Well,
okay, I think he's gonna. Okay, I think this froggy dude's gonna ask a question. Or tadpole. What is this thing? It's a frog.
Because again, there's none. How do you go from
I don't know if that's
dead
true,
matter to living matter?
That's true.
You don't.
Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you?
Well, sir, let me ask you a question.
You see? Well, sir, let me ask you a question. The question to Mr. Batman was, why wouldn't you? The answer is, here's the answer to why wouldn't you. I'll tell you why. Because. No. Well, sir, let me ask you a question. All right, every single time. Here's a bit of advice. Anytime anybody's in one of those rooms where Mr. Batman likes to eat up his victims and bash them and humiliate them and insult them. Every time Mr. Batman says to you, sir, what is truth? Do you know where truth comes from? Do you know where the information comes from? La la la. You know these usual thing. Just say to him, sir, let me ask you a question. Every single time he asks you a question, say, sir, let me ask you a question. And say that to Darth Dawkins as well. When he says, listen to me carefully. La 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 blah 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 blah. Blah 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 blah. You know way Darth Dawkins treats his guests, even his sycophants. He treats them like shit. He's a horrible human being. But anyway, whenever he does that, say to him, Darth, I'd like to ask you a question. Don't ever answer his question. Always ask a question, because that's what he does, and that's what Jim Barbar, Mr. Batman does. Play their game. Fine. So let's see if we can pick out where we can actually catch this guy in a live talk. How to counter his nonsense.
What is truth?
Well, now you're moving the goalposts, Hillbilly.
No, sir, I'm not, because you're denying truth. You're denying a scientific law. So now we have to actually define what truth is, because you don't seem to understand it.
Wow, that's you see, we have to define truth because you don't seem to understand it. You know what that means? That means that you, Jim Barbar, are claiming to understand truth. Now that is a very, very childish claim, because we know there's no such thing as truth. Truth is it's very it's not one thing. It's a set of facts, and it could refer to anything. It could be true logically, could be true empirically. I mean, but that truth doesn't make sense. It's got to be there's got to be an object to which this truth applies. An object being a court case, a argument, whatever. But there's got to be something there. That truth just doesn't make any fucking sense. It's like Darth Dawkins saying, "What is ultimate?" Mr. Batman says, "What is truth?" And Darth Dawkins says, "What is ultimate?" It's that same crap.
Well, life does come from life, but you're denying
life comes from life. Thank you very much for that admission.
See how he just fucking interrupts. Mr. Batman, you're very disrespectful. Stop interrupting people when they're talking.
So now we're going to take spontaneous generation off the table, correct?
You got to let me respond to you.
Yes, let me respond.
Sure. So are we taking spontaneous generation off the table now that you've admitted that life comes from life?
Let him respond, just like he wants to.
Then, sir, then you have not admitted that life comes from life, and we still need to go back to our definition of what is truth.
He's a bully.
Because you don't understand it.
Well,
he is a bully.
It's physically possible for things to come into existence. That's physically possible.
Really?
Yes.
How do you know that, sir?
Stupid.
Because there's no other way that life could originate on Earth. There's no other way.
So it doesn't matter how much scientific evidence I bring to bear to show you that life only comes from life. You're going to continue to believe in spontaneous generation, 100-year-old dead scientific hypothesis.
Nobody said anything about spontaneous generation. Nobody's claiming spontaneous generation. Jim, Mr. Batman, you're the only one who's mentioned this phrase, spontaneous generation. It's another bullshit. It's the truth. It's ultimate. What is ultimate? It's spontaneous generation. Darth Dawkins comes up with a whole bunch of phrases that make absolutely no sense. So do you. And I'm just going to try and point them out as I hear them.
Didn't even make it to theory. You're going to believe that rather than the plethora of scientific evidence. Thank you, sir, for being honest.
Well, it's better than what you're postulating, which is God.
So it doesn't matter how much.
Which, you see, he just doesn't fucking shut up. This is why Mr. Batman has never grown up and never will. He's not an adult. He's a child. He's in an adult conversation setting. When you respect another human being and you're trying to have a conversation with him, you listen, or you watch and listen, and then you get the cue that he's finished, and then you carry on, he or she. Then you carry on, and then they do the same thing. When you're done, you sort of give them the cue, you're done, and the cue, and then they do their thing. Mr. Batman, he just butts in and over talks, and he does exactly the same thing that Darth Dawkins does. Just watch how similar these two are. It's no wonder they don't like each other, because they're so similar.
Hold on.
Evidence I bring to bear. You're going to believe.
See, he's filibustering. He's bullying.
What you want to believe rather than the factual scientific evidence. Is that correct?
What you're saying is the alternative is God came in and created. Are you a New Earth creationist?
Sir, are you denying the fact that the evidence points to a creator? And
you see, where did that come from? Are you denying the fact that the evidence points to a creator? What a stupid thing to say. Are you denying the fact, okay? The fact that evidence points to a creator. What? Where does that all come from? He's so full of it. It's just... And to think that this guy's like my age, and to be that like child-minded and aggressive about it. It's like temper tantrum time at the Mr. Batman household all the time.
just because the evidence points to a creator, you don't like that, you're going to walk away from that scientific evidence. Is that what you're saying?
There's no scientific evidence for creator.
I'm bringing to bear all kinds of it, and you can't seem
No,
to
you
answer a
haven't.
single question.
There is no scientific evidence. This guy in the very beginning said empirical evidence is what leads to truth. Okay, he said that. Now listen to Mr. Batman. He's like somebody who knows how to swim just a little bit, but he's now in the deep end, and he's like, you know, he's not panicking, he's not struggling, but he's like doesn't know what the fuck he's doing.
So I think there's plenty
you're
of
trying to poke
scientific
holes.
evidence.
No, you're trying to use
then what is the
argumentum
law of
from
biogenesis?
ignorance.
What is the law of biogenesis?
Well, tell us. You see, what he wants to know that what is the law of biogenesis, and he's a science teacher, and if somebody says, you know, doesn't respond, what you do as a teacher is you teach, you tell them what the law of biogenesis is. Let's see if he does that.
We already went over the law.
Okay, now do you accept the scientific law of biogenesis?
Is that life comes from life? Is that what I don't know, but is that the scientific law that life comes from life? Sort of very very sort of in a nutshell-y kind of way.
I accept that life comes from life, but you don't accept
too much. That's a
that
scientific
life can
law
come
not
from
observed
non-life.
to ever be violated.
See how he interrupted right there. He's very abusive in that way. He's wait, let me tell you something, Jim. When you act this way with other people, in this sort of bossy, privileged, entitled kind of a way, you are opening yourself up to get punched in the face.
Now, how does something that you want to believe make a difference to a scientific law that we see and can repeat on a daily basis? How does that make a difference?
If you can't accept that life comes from non-life, then I don't think
Why would I accept something that is a known lie?
Well, I don't think the alternative is substituting in a thousands of year old book and
Sir, why would I
to believe
substitute
in
a known
mystical
lie
sky
just
daddy
because I don't
which
like
has no physical evidence for it?
truth? So now we have to go back and define truth again because
No,
it's
we don't.
apparent you don't
No,
understand
we
truth.
don't need to go over definitions. I think we're pretty clear.
Oh, we're pretty clear that you don't know what you're talking about, and your science is sorely lacking. I have destroyed
so now
your
what he's
position.
doing-
I don't think you have
Now
a
what
good
he's
grasp
doing-
on
Wait,
science.
10 minutes.
Wait.
10 minutes. And
Gentlemen. Now what he's doing, he is insulting. Now he's turning on the ad hominem, and his voice has been high and whiny and stressy all the time. Now he's turning it up a notch, and as he turns up a notch his voice, he throws in these insults, tries to demean, degrade. Okay, this is a Christian, right? I just want to let me just throw up the intro here. I'll show you something that I noticed. If you read through this Galatians, all the way. Hold on a second. Let me see here. Okay, so why am I blocking everything? They're blocking everything, Mister. Okay, there you go. All right. So you see here that, you know, when you follow the desires, blah 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 blah. But at the very end, it says, At the very end of that sentence, which reads like, which reads, anyone living that sort of life will not, inherit the kingdom of God. Then the next sentence doesn't seem, we must remember, we've got to read the next few verses because, or this verse anyway, because this is the crux of the matter. But the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against these things. In other words, there's no law against love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Right? Now, there's no law against these emotions or these traits. And they are mentioned specifically in Galatians that if you have these traits, you will enter the kingdom of God. Now, let's go through each of these traits and see which ones, or which one, if any one, Mr. Batman actually has. Okay. Tell you what, hold on a minute. What should I do here? No, I'll just leave it. Okay, so, oops. So just give me 1 second. Okay, fine. So let me just grab that one there and make it big as I can. Oh, let's just bring it up here. I'm just gonna make it big enough for us to read properly. All right. Look up top. Okay. Approximately halfway down plus one line. But the Holy Spirit, okay, this is the God that they're talking about. This is the Jesus that Jim's talking about, that Mr. Batman's talking about. The Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives. In other words, if you're with the Holy Spirit, if you have Jesus in you, if you follow Jesus, this is the fruit of following Jesus. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Now, make a list. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, make a list and make 9 lines. Number them 1 through 9. And number 1 is love. Number 2 is joy. Write these down. Number 1 is love. Number 2 is joy. Number 3 is peace. Number 4 is patience. Number 5 is kindness. Number 6 is goodness. Number 7 is faithfulness. Number 8 is gentleness. And number 9 is self-control. Okay, is your list ready? Good. Now let's go and see if we can apply any of these fruit from the Holy Spirit to Mr. Batman. All right, you ready with your list? Let's look at number 1. Love. Yes, no? Okay, it's either a check mark or it's a cross. Okay, love. Cross. Joy. No, a cross. Peace, Mr. Batman, a cross. Patience, Mr. Batman, a cross. Kindness. Are we talking about Mr. Batman? Nope, nothing there. Cross. Goodness in Mr. Batman. Is there any goodness in Mr. Batman? No, that's a cross. How about faithfulness? Is Mr. Batman a faithful man? Remember, he said he's the chief of sinners in the previous episode here. Maybe yesterday. So if you're watching this later on in time, it's yesterday. He said he was the chief of sinner, the chief sinner, because he sinned more than anybody. So faithfulness, no. Gentleness, we see this. No, there's nothing. And self-control, absolutely none. So Jim, guess what? You are going to join the rest of us in the lake of fire. So you're not going to get away with it by preaching that you've repented. You've divorced, Jim. You are divorced. By being divorced, you remove yourself from the valid applicants to the kingdom of heaven. You, my friend, Jim, because of your actions, your willfully, freely taken actions, you had a choice, but instead you chose evil. You choose right now to deny love to yourself, to your wife, and to us. You choose to deny joy to yourself, to your wife, I don't know. You're a lulz cow, so the joy is for us, and the joy we see joy. We don't see joy in you, but we see joy. No, you don't have joy inside of you. You don't show peace to yourself, to your wife, or to us. You don't show patience to yourself, to your wife, or to us. You definitely have no kindness to yourself, or to your wife, or to us. There's not even a hint of goodness in yourself, to your wife, or to us. As for faithfulness, there is no hint that you have ever been faithful to yourself with 3 divorces. There's no hint that you have ever been faithful to your wife with your overbearing, bossy, patriarchal, misogynistic approach to her. You are not gentle to yourself. You don't show gentleness to yourself, nor to your wife, and definitely not to us. And as far as self-control, you don't self-control yourself. You don't control yourself in front of your wife. And you don't control yourself in front of us. So there is no way, according to Galatians chapter 5, verses 19 through 23, Jim Barbar, that you will inherit the kingdom of God. You, sir, are surely destined to the lake of fire. And I want you to come and have a chat with me, and we'll talk about this, and we'll get you through this, okay? I'm not doing this to make fun of you. I'm doing this to reach out to help you with this situation that you're in. It's pretty terrible. And you need a friend, Jim. You need someone who is, and you know that me and you are friends. You and I are friends because we've had our pretty, intimate discussions, right? Where we know a lot about each other, okay? Because we've been there. So come on, come back. I know you're having some kind of a mental attitude. You've got a situation with you're a narcissist. You're arrogant, yet you're stupid, and it's not a good mix. So let's come onto a chat room with me. Come onto a live stream. We'll have a talk. You will exhibit love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control in my room when you talk with me, because that is what is produced. That is what is produced by the Holy Spirit in the form of the fruit of the person, of the character. Okay? Sorry about that. Very, very, very long-winded diatribe. But we'll now get back to our regularly scheduled programming.
You're just completely wiped the floor with. And that's not what my intention is, sir. My intention is to get you to understand that you're standing on nothing but whole cloth, and you're about to fall straight into the pit of hell, because what you believe, sir, is a lie.
Of course.
So you're saying that what I just said about life arising from non-life is a worse theory than a all-powerful
Sir, it doesn't
deity,
qualify as theory.
all-powerful
It's not
deity.
even a hypothesis. It is nothing but a false voodoo belief system.
And what is theism? Then
Clear,
what is
sir.
theism?
It doesn't correlate to any known facts. So why would you believe it?
I don't know if that's true, Hillbilly. I think you're making a lot of assumptions.
Really?
Yes.
I would recommend that you go do a Google search of the law of biogenesis.
That's the second time he's gone and said go and do a Google search of the law of biogenesis. Even after this guy has said, yes, I know what the law of biogenesis is. It is life from life. They've actually hashed it out. And Mr. Batman actually even conceded to this guy that, yes, okay, good, you understand that biogenesis means life from life. And now he just said, I suggest you go and Google life from what biogenesis means. Mr. Batman is not quite following along here. What he's doing, he's got a script, okay, and he lost his place in the script a little bit. He's kind of doing repetition. He didn't, when you're reading from a script and you put the pages one done and one, as soon as you're done, you put it underneath. But sometimes you get interrupted or something, and the page doesn't go underneath at the right place, and then it pops up way too quickly as a repeat. Well, that's just what happened here, it seems.
That's never been violated. You'll never find any example of life coming from
Okay, I'm just going to leave them to it, okay? For as long as I can stand until I have to interrupt.
living matter, never happened.
I think that whether I find an example or not, I can imagine that it's physically possible. It's very easy.
Well, you can imagine that there's pixies on the dark side of the moon. Does that make it true?
There's more evidence for life arising from non-life.
You could imagine that there is pixies on the dark side of the moon. Does that make it true?
There's more evidence for life.
Like I said, here we go. We can't have a conversation because you have no idea what the definition of truth is. So let's go back to truth, sir. You're an evolutionist. You believe that we're nothing but chemicals walking around, bumping into one another. Now, what causes our consciousness? We were talking about this earlier, but we got off onto a little tangent. But what causes our consciousness to be able to understand it? Is consciousness simply a chemical reaction in the brain?
I think that would be a oversimplification.
Well, then why don't you go give me your simplification of what consciousness is, sir? I mean, you said that science has no consensus. I'm giving you my consensus based on what I think your worldview states. I know where consciousness comes from. I'm trying to get you to tell me where you think
consciousness comes from living matter.
Well, wait a minute. Let's not try and define living matter. Let's just try and define consciousness, because you're using an undefined term to try and define a term. So let's just stick with what we can define. You understand chemical reactions, right?
Of course.
Okay, great. So what in this physical world with matter and energy can be causing us to have consciousness? What could it be other than basically a chemical reaction inside your physical brain?
If you wanted to boil it down like that, I don't think there would be a better source of causing whatever you're saying is going to cause that.
So you agree that is, according to your worldview, a viable belief that our consciousness comes from the chemical reactions in our brain, correct?
Yeah, in our entire body.
Okay. Well, we know that the brain works in a specific way. We know if you cut off the toe, it doesn't affect the memory, correct?
Well, the thing is.
Well, can we stick to what we know for right now? And let's just stick with the brain, because the brain's more complicated than you'll ever be able to explain with your worldview. So let's just stick to consciousness right now, okay?
Well, I don't think. Well, what I'm trying to say is, I don't think consciousness is limited.
Well, here we go. Let's go. And I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to divert, and I'm going to keep you on track here because I'm a teacher and I'm good at that. No, so let me go ahead and point to something.
You're cutting me off.
If our consciousness is nothing but a chemical reaction in our brain, then how do you know that anything you do, scientifically speaking, testing, observing, repeating, is true? Because it simply could be a chemical reaction in your brain.
Just because it's a chemical reaction doesn't mean it's not true.
Doesn't mean it's not true. Does it mean it is true?
It doesn't really. A chemical reaction doesn't really say.
Are you denying the laws of logic right from the get-go? Have you ever heard of the law of non-contradiction? If you're going to interrupt
every point I make, I'm not going to be able to make my points.
Have you ever heard of the law of non-contradiction, sir? Because the law of non-contradiction.
Have you noticed how he interrupts? And this guy is very, he's obviously very chill about it. And he said, if you're going to interrupt me each and every time I try and explain something or answer a question, then I'm just not going to get it done. You see that? This is why Mr. Batman's a joke. He's actually a pitiful person. And honestly, I invite you to come and have a chat, Mr. Batman. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, you still have a challenge out there for me to debate you on the first, on Genesis 1:1. So let's do it. Remember, brush up on your Paleo Hebrew before you actually attend this debate that we're going to have, that you've challenged me to, and I accept it.
Fiction is just one of the requirements in science to do science. So are you denying science, sir?
This guy? Seriously?
I think you're being very disingenuous,
yes,
to be honest.
Agree.
Disingenuous. Can you define that for me, please?
Oh, God.
I think you know what the meaning is.
I think he knows what the meaning is too.
Sir, I'm just trying to get you to come to the conclusion that your belief system is not based in science, not based in observation, not based in testable, observable, repeatable observational science.
Let me explain something to you.
I don't know why anybody would believe something like that, because
your whole argument.
Where it's at. Why? And here's the truth. You want to know the truth? The truth is what it says in Romans.
That God
is going to
give me a chance to respond.
Turn loose.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, stick to it.
His wrath on the unrighteous. That you suppress the truth of God in unrighteousness. You know that there's a God. Just like I know that there's
let
God.
Me respond, yes or no?
Because his invisible attributes have been made known. Now, that's what I'm trying to point out to you. That's why you don't have a definition for truth. That's why you won't even talk to me about the laws of logic and science.
Hillbilly.
Because you have no basis in fact for them. So I'll try it one more time, sir.
Your entire argument boils down to, I don't know how things work.
Oh, no, not at all, sir. I do know how things work. You don't know how things work, and that's what I'm pointing out. You have no basis for science.
From ignorance. So since you have no leg to stand on...
Yes, you have an argument from ignorance. Can we continue, and I'll help educate you?
Since you have no leg to stand on, you just interrupt and play word games and say...
Mr. Batman is getting so crushed here that... A normal person, literally a regular, normal, non-narcissistic, non-malignant narcissist would understand that he's getting crushed. Literally would understand it. But this guy, Mr. Batman, because he's such a narcissist, he's at the top level of narcissism, he doesn't even realize that he's getting crushed. But subconsciously he does, because he raises his voice and he tells his opponent that he's wrong, that everything is wrong, that he makes this claim that he's never observed anything. How can he know anything? He's never observed. He starts making these incoherent rage statements.
What's your definition of truth, sir? Well, that's a contradiction.
Yeah. Exactly.
Instead of looking at the facts, which is you believe in a mystical sky daddy.
Is truth by its very nature exclusive?
Sky daddy, which has no scientific evidence.
Is truth by his very nature exclusive?
Okay, well, I'm gonna go through that one. Is truth by its very nature exclusive? Now, I'm gonna admit something to you that I don't quite know what that means. Is truth by its very nature exclusive? To my mind, that means absolutely nothing. If somebody asks me a question, is truth by its very nature exclusive? I would have to say, I do not understand the question. I have a question about the meaning of what you're asking me. Is truth by its very nature exclusive? Could you explain to me what that actually means? Because I'm honestly trying to figure out if I can get around this question, if I can understand it. Is truth by its very nature exclusive? Okay, I got it. I understand it. I understand the question, but I don't understand what it means. Okay, so if anybody can help me out, I'll be more than happy. But I don't think there's an answer to that ridiculous, irrational question.
Is truth by its very nature exclusive?
I'm getting tired of talking to you. You can talk to down. You're
I imagine you would being shown wrong over and over again, but that's okay. I'll continue.
You see, Mr. Batman, he's so funny. He must really aggravate his wife, because she's got to watch all this, right? She lives with the guy. She knows what he's like, and she's got to watch all this, and she has to shut up. Because she's a woman, and he's a Christian fundamentalist. That, he's a wife abuser. He's obviously a woman abuser, misogynist, because he's a Christian, and he lives that kind of a man on woman submissiveness, assertiveness, aggressiveness.
You to ask the questions. Is truth by its very nature exclusive?
What does it mean? What does that question mean, Mr. Batman? You've asked it 3 times and we don't know what it means.
You can talk to down. I'm done with you.
Okay, I'll go make coffee.
Well, okay. I think that's about it. We can cut it off right there, really. It's pretty funny. Is truth by its very nature exclusive? Please, somebody tell me what that means. Please. Okay. I don't see anything happening in the chat. All I can say is thank you for watching. I appreciate it very much that you watched all the way through. And we'll be back with something else pretty soon. Don't forget to catch my God is Imaginary 50 Proofs. I'm at number 40 something right now. So, what can we do but say goodbye? Goodbye, and thank you for watching. We'll go out with a little bit of blues.